Welcome to Women in WP, a bi-monthly podcast about women who blog, design, develop, and more in the WordPress community.
Welcome to the show. I'm Angela Bowman.
I'm Tracy Epps.
And I'm Amy Masson.
Our guest today is Natalie MacLees, who helps small businesses and nonprofits meet accessibility guidelines through her company digitally. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello.
As you know, we like to start off each episode by asking our guests to tell us about their journey into WordPress. How did you get started?
So I've been building websites since 1996, so for a really long time. And around 2006, a friend approached me. She was a photographer and a poet, and she wanted a blog where she could feature her photography and poetry. It was like a beautiful photo with a little poem every day. And I researched some different options. At that time, there was a whole lot of hosted blog services like Blog Harbor. These things aren't around anymore. And I did a whole bunch of research and settled on WordPress because, number one, it didn't use tables for layout, if you remember that. And it was totally customizable, and then you weren't at the mercy of being hosted on some platform. So I customized the Kubrick theme, if you remember that lovely one, and got this blog set up for her. And it was actually like a really good experience. So I just kind of got sucked into it after that and started using it more and more.
I love it. 96. What was your first website on?
It was on AOL Hometown.
Had a GeoCities, Angel Fire, remember all of those?
Yeah. So I actually had an AOL Hometown site that won multiple awards from AOL.
Whoa.
Because it was so awesome. There was a page where I posted puzzles, and it was an Amazon affiliate site, which I had to have been one of the first few hundred Amazon affiliate sites that would link to buy these puzzle books. And I ended up having a newscaster somewhere in Georgia become obsessed with the puzzles I posted, and he proposed marriage to me on the air.
Wow.
No.
Wow. So basically, you're kind of a big deal.
And now you're married.
To a newscaster in Georgia.
We're going to need your autograph, and then, yeah. So.
What kind of puzzles were you posting?
Like logic puzzles. So there was regular logic puzzles and lateral logic puzzles. I don't know. It's kind of a hobby, something I'm obsessed with.
Were you making the puzzles yourself?
No, they were samples from books that I was selling as affiliate links on Amazon.
Oh.
Fair use copyright law.
I was going to say, is there a copyright issue there?
Yeah, so I just put up like one or two from these, the whole book of puzzles, and then I would link to buy the book. So yeah, no, I never had any problems.
Interesting.
So you all know all about content marketing.
I know.
And this was all on AOL.
On AOL Hometown, yeah.
She's been working the system since the beginning here. What kind of sites did you start building after the photography site? Did you make a business right away? Was it a hobby? When did you started being your job?
So I started doing freelance websites on the side around 2003. So I guess I'd just been doing it for a couple of years at that point. And they had just been in straight HTML, just static HTML sites.
We all started there.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Yep. And, and if you go back to the 90s, that's even before CSS. So it was real fun.
Yep. Remember the spacer GIF?
Oh, yes.
Spacer GIF.
Oh, I was all into nested tables. I was down with nested tables.
Oh, yeah. 6 or 7 deep.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I was real excited about, web standards and CSS when that became a thing. I got really into it. So I built, I had a full-time job. So I was just doing these websites on the side part-time. So like a couple a year. It's not like I was doing a high volume, and mostly just for friends and acquaintances. And after I built the blog, I did start encouraging more clients to use WordPress. And then, especially after I went to WordCamp, my first WordCamp in 2007, which I just sort of stumbled upon on accident. And I was just really impressed with the people I met there. Everyone was so nice. And it was WordCamp San Francisco, but it was 2007. So there were maybe 200 people there. It wasn't very big. Matt Mullenweg was there. He was actually setting out the sandwiches from Subway. How far we've come. He was running around like a crazy person getting all the food ready for everyone. And I just met so many people, and everyone was so kind and so generous that that's what really pulled me in. And then a couple years later, I was at South by Southwest and met the founders of Meetup, and that was kind of before Meetup was really a thing, and talked to them about their platform and what they were building. And I was like, well, that sounds really cool. Like, I want to meet other people who like things that I like. And I got home and was like, what do I like? I know, WordPress. And I looked, and there was a WordPress meetup, and I joined it. And within a week, the founder of the group stepped down. And Meetup sent out all the messages like, oh, your group is going to be dissolved unless someone steps up. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'd never even been to a Meetup, and I took over running the group.
Impressive.
Wow.
It all worked out.
You've been at the start of everything.
I know.
Did you invent the internet? Because
I did actually. Yeah, it was me and Al Gore.
And she started Twitter too.
I think I heard that she invented meetup.com.
Right. And Twitter, yeah.
And Twitter.
Yeah, don't leave that out.
So I know that you do a lot of, or you have done quite a bit of WordCamp speaking. And one of the reasons I know this is because my very first WordCamp Las Vegas 2013, you were one of the speakers. And that was when I came to my first WordCamp, and I sat in the back and was scared and didn't talk to anybody. But everything I learned kind of blew my mind and opened up this world that really changed the trajectory of my business forever. And you were one of those people.
That was the WordCamp where I dress coordinated with the venue, yeah?
I don't remember, but I do think you had purple hair.
Oh, pink hair, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I went back. I just went back and found the 2013 WordCamp Las Vegas, and it's still online. And so I looked at the schedule. You spoke at 11:45 a.m. on defining your user experience.
this is creepy.
This was a very meaningful WordCamp. It's my most meaningful WordCamp. So
I think your first one is always the most meaningful one.
yeah. And I mean, I've never had such an impactful conference since then, but it was kind of, this was before I knew that there was even a WordPress community. It was just, oh, I make websites with WordPress, and I'm all by myself in my house all day, every day, and I don't know anybody. And then I go, and it was like, oh my gosh, who are all these people? And everybody was so nice. So your first one was the one you just talked about, but is there one that has been like super impactful or even meaningful to you other than the first one?
I mean, the first one really stands out, of course, because I'd been to lots of conferences, but they're just not like WordCamp. Like other ones that stand out, I organized WordCamp Los Angeles in 2013, and I felt like there was the team that we all worked together. Like, I don't know, that camp was just really, really nice. And it wasn't because of me, it was because of the community and the people who participated and the speakers that we had, and everybody just kind of pitched in and helped with everything. And it was just really lovely. There was just a really nice feeling in the air, that whole camp. So that's definitely one that stands out. The first WordCamp I ever spoke at was WordCamp Las Vegas, but in 2011, and that one is not online. And I'm actually really grateful for that.
Neither is 2014, which is another one I went to. I went to the same one the year after, and there was a session that I ended up in the wrong room and I missed, and I really wanted to go back and watch, and none of it went online.
Yeah, sometimes there's just problems.
Hey there, Women in WP listeners. Tracy here, interrupting with a quick message about you. When Amy, Angela, and I first started this podcast, we had no idea how it would be received, or if anyone would listen at all. We never expected such an enthusiastic response from the WordPress community, so thank you. If you want to help us keep this podcast going strong, there's a few ways that you can help. The first one you're already doing, listening, so thank you for that. And if you really enjoy the show, or even if you don't, but you know someone else that would, please share this with a friend. Finally, we have a Patreon page if you would like to contribute to the show financially each month. There's different tiers of giving, and some levels will even get you some cool perks as well. Visit patreon.com/womeninwp for more info. And now let's get back to the show.
I think your company name is adorable because it's digitally, right? And it's got the term for accessibility in it, which is really great, really cute. So I'm assuming, and also I see you do focus a lot on accessibility. And I also do as well. And I love hearing how you learned about it. How did you become passionate about it and want to say you know what, no, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to learn and focus on helping people be more accessible.
Yeah, so I was building websites really early on, and I got a job in 1999 working at Penn State University. And if you are familiar with Penn State University, they're actually really well regarded in the accessibility community. Their accessibility department really helps to drive everything on campus to make sure that they are accommodating of students of all different abilities and capacities in all aspects, physically, and then their online presence as well. So as I came into that job, writing my static HTML with no CSS yet pages.
I can relate.
Yeah. Accessibility was super important there. And I had tons and tons of free training through them in how to build accessible websites and why it was really important. And I worked there for 3 years. And so that just kind of became the way I did it. It was just the way that I approached web projects. And after I left there and worked in other places building websites, I was shocked and dismayed that that was not the case throughout the industry. So I've kind of brought that with me to every job that I've had, is to just raise awareness among the rest of the team on why this is important and why we should be doing it. I've argued with the business managers about the business case for it, and if it's worth the money, the extra money and time that it takes on projects. So I think having that experience early on in my career really impressed upon me how easy it is to just do things, the quote unquote right way, and to approach things and build them to be accessible from the beginning. It's really not that much more work. And that there's just really, I don't feel any excuse not to do it and to exclude people, even if that's not your intention.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and because I think a lot of people look at it as the mindset of, oh, that this is some extra thing. But if you go at it when you're starting the development of your product or your business with that mentality of being accessible, you're right. It just comes naturally because oh yeah, if you want to be able to reach your audience, if they can't access your website, well,
right. You can't sell something to people when they can't use your site.
exactly. Exactly. And so like, I'm always fascinated with pushback, like you said. What kind of methods do you do to help win your argument other than like, come on, it's a no brainer, but like, how do you tell that to people that keep pushing back on that?
Yeah, it depends on who I'm talking to. For other developers, I've had a lot of luck with talking about how accessibility is a civil right and how the things that we build are used by more people than we imagine, and how important it is that everyone have access, especially as more and more of our lives move online. It's more and more important that everyone can get to that. So I gave a talk on accessibility at WordCamp Long Beach, which was last summer, I think. And at that time, I haven't checked recently, but at that time, we still had, 15 or 20 different potential presidential candidates. And not a single one of them had an accessible website. So if I'm somebody who relies on accessible technology or assistive technology to access the web, how am I supposed to be informed to vote?
And voting really is important for the rules and laws that benefit everyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just the things that people get locked out from, online banking, time tracking, and work communications. Civil things, getting involved with or contacting their local government about things or being informed to vote. All of those things are things we do online, and we can't leave people out from that. We just can't. I think it's like also a question of dignity. I know one time I was having a conversation with another developer who said, I just don't understand. Like, if someone who is blind wants to buy a toothbrush online, why can't he just have his buddy help him out and order it for him? And I said, well, that seems really simple to you, but think about like every time you needed to buy something online, you've got to impose upon friends or family to do that for you. Like, where's your sense of independence and your sense of dignity as a human being? Like, you're taking that away from someone. So I think it's really important.
You mentioned that your time at Penn State really helped shape your views, and that was in 1999.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how different accessibility is now, because on 1999, it would have never been on my radar to even consider. So how is it different, like what you were doing for those websites in 1999 versus what you're doing for people now?
Yeah, so here's the thing that's a little bit scary. So the WCAG guidelines, I think, were originally published in 1999, and that was WCAG 1.0. There have since been 2 more versions of WCAG. So WCAG 2.0 is now about 12 years old, I think, and 2.1 just came out like 2 years ago. So the accessibility guidelines themselves haven't changed very much. And basically all they did for 2.0 to 2.1 is they added in more things around mobile, recognizing that people with disabilities use mobile devices. And so some more support for those things. And then they also have added in a few more checkpoints for people with cognitive disabilities, which have been largely left out of the guidelines so far. So there's, in some ways, not very much about it has changed, even though the web has changed drastically. I think one thing that has really changed, especially with the push toward doing everything in JavaScript recently, is I don't know what it is about like React and Vue that makes people just forget everything they know about writing HTML.
Yes.
But the tutorial, even just the tutorials that teach you how to do React and Vue are just terrible, and don't use, simply don't use heading tags or buttons or links, and just put click handlers on divs and spans, and it's all so bad. And then that's how somehow all of that goes out the window, and you can build things with JavaScript that are accessible, but somehow we all forget how to write the basics of semantic HTML when we start using React.
Yeah, I've ranted on that as well because, well, because I started, my first website was in 96 as well. And so, yeah, I, bought an HTML book and I taught myself that way. And so when I taught at my alma mater at UW Milwaukee, I was like, we're going to go do the basics. Yeah, you can do all these like shortcuts, but I was like, this is how you used to have to do it. You need to know the basic like principles of this so that you can make this correct. Like there's all these different shortcuts and stuff, but yeah. And it's interesting working with people that are just so gung-ho about JavaScript. So then I just find myself saying like, oh yeah, and then it's going to do this and this and this. And then they were like, I was like, oh yeah, well that should be easy, right? Because I could do it in HTML. Like here, I just made a mock-up for you. Here's how to do that. Just make your code do that. I just can't.
You talked about these government sites not being accessible. Can you describe for our listeners who really maybe don't quite understand what that means? What are some very common mistakes, particularly like on these government sites that are, campaign sites that are probably in a way rather simple sites? They, have a picture and they have some text. What are the mistakes that make it not accessible that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think one of the most common things is putting huge amounts of text in images. So just think about Instagram and all it's a pretty picture with a quote on top of it. That's not accessible. No one, if you can't see that picture because you have a visual impairment, you have no idea what that quote is or what the picture is or any of that. And I think there's definitely a lot of that Instagram aesthetic that's come over to web design, and those kinds of things get used a lot, and especially on campaign websites. Like big banner image with text that's part of the image. And then they don't add, right? You can add alternative attribute to that so that it would be readable by assistive technology, but it often gets forgotten. Another big thing is, just lack of semantic HTML, not using headings, but, instead styling a paragraph to look like a heading, and that's not recognizable by assistive technology as a heading.
And it's bad for SEO.
Exactly. Many of the things that are good for accessibility are good for SEO.
And it's good for cleaner code. Like it's easier to read as a developer.
Yes. Easier, better maintainability, loads faster.
I want to tell people all the time that the heading tags are not for the size of your font.
Yes. And then I think the other big area where sites fall down is forms. And, a form is the main way that we interact with a website, whether that's adding things to a cart, which is a form, even though it doesn't really look like it all the time. Signing up to volunteer for a campaign or contacting a representative or whatever it happens to be. Forms are where a lot of things go wrong. Every field should have a label that's visible all the time and it actually coded as a label. If there's error messages, those need to be coded in a way that they're attached to the field so that if there's an error, there's a typo in my email address, or I forgot to enter my phone number. Because if you don't have that, like even if that error message is visible on the form, it's not easily accessible to someone using a screen reader if it's not coded correctly. And so you don't do your forms correctly, and now you're cutting off people from interacting with your site.
And not only, I always get this where the error is an error occurred.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for that helpful information. I have full visibility. That confuses me.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. A good error message should tell you what the error is and how to fix it.
Do you feel like accessibility is hard or easy for those people building websites? And are there things like with WordPress, like themes or plugins or anything that will make it easier for you as a person building sites for client to make your site accessible?
So the thing about accessibility is there's no part of it that is particularly difficult or challenging. I think what does make it seem so daunting is that it's just so much. It's so big. There are so many things. And like, where do you even get started? So it's always good to kind of look at what are the most common things that go wrong on sites and start there and start learning. And I don't like, if somebody is building sites for clients, and if I said, well, are the sites you build for clients accessible? I don't really know. Well, chances are the answer is no. If you don't know, the answer is probably no. But I would say don't feel a lot of pressure that the next site you build is going to have perfect accessibility, whatever that means. Learn something about alternative text or proper heading structure or list or ARIA landmarks or how to set up forms, and do that for the next site. And then keep adding. Every site you build, add something else so that you kind of gradually build up that knowledge and every site is more accessible than the last one. For WordPress in particular, there are a small handful of themes in the repository that are marked as accessibility ready, not as accessible, because most of the accessibility of a WordPress site has to do with what you do with it and not the theme itself. But they are accessibility ready. Unfortunately, it's only about 100 of them. But there are some pretty nice themes in that selection that I lean on pretty heavily for my clients who don't have the budget for a full custom theme. So definitely check them out. There is no equivalent tag, unfortunately, for plugins. So if you were trying to build a WordPress site, it does get a little bit challenging when it comes to plugins to determine which ones are accessible. And then sometimes a plugin might be accessible with a certain setting configuration, but you might change the settings and now it's no longer accessible. So I encourage everyone to harass all theme and plugin developers constantly to say, hey, is this accessible? Are these settings accessible? Because they should be building that into their products and making it easy for someone who is not technical and setting up a website to understand that if I set pale blue background with white text, that might be a problem.
Yeah, it's good advice. I say bug everyone very often. What kind of tools that do you use or prefer to check accessibility on websites?
I really like the Wave tool from WebAIM, which is just at wave.webaim.org. You can also do it as a browser plugin. That one is really nice, and they recently redid the UI about a year ago, so it's very user-friendly.
It's so much nicer.
So if you're a beginner and you're not really sure and not super technical, it will flag all of the issues and explain them very nicely so you can understand how to fix them. And then the other tool that I use a lot in my development process is Axe from DQ. And that's a browser plugin. It is free, but they are working on a premium version that the beta is open and free. So if you're a developer, I encourage you to try it. It's really helpful. So in addition to doing the automated tests, the premium version also walks you through some manual tests. It's really nice.
So I do some work with different departments at the local university when they need websites done. And of course, one of the requirements is, meeting accessibility. And that's something that I always try to do on the websites that I'm building. And these are, like smaller, like grant-based projects that different professors are doing. But the problem I have is that once you hand off the site and they start working on it, all of that goes to the wayside. Do you have a plan or a way that you encourage your users to maintain that?
I do, actually. So I am a big fan of Marc Jacobs WT Help plugin. If you're not familiar with it, it lets you put a little help manual right inside the WordPress dashboard. It's really just a post type, but it's like in the dashboard only. And you can organize that however you want, and you can even make, like you could have a, like I've got a bunch of little test sites across the internet. You can set up a help manual on a site and then automatically import it into new sites when you set them up, so you don't have to recreate the content over and over again. So I will put extensive information in there about, with links to like WCAG's alt text decision tree. When I'm adding an image, does it have text in it? Is it decorative? Does it have a caption? Like all these things that you need, it'll walk you through that. Proper heading structure, proper use of lists, paying attention to your reading level, which is something a lot of people forget, which is for cognitive disabilities. Ideally, the whole internet wouldn't be much more than about an 8th grade reading level. So I put all of that in a manual in the back end, and then I also do hands-on training with my clients at the time that I hand off the site to walk them through all of those things. And I found that that's really helpful. Like a lot of my clients, you know, are nonprofit organizations or universities where accessibility is really important. And so the people who are there who are working on the site find it really helpful to have that information that they need for making good decisions with the site going forward.
That is really helpful to know, because I've never once handed over a site to anyone, including the people that are managing the sites at the university, that they have uploaded an image and actually wrote alt text. It's like the easiest thing to do.
Yes. Another good plugin to help with that is Joe Dolson's WP accessibility plugin, which adds a column to the media library to tell you whether an image has alt or not.
Yeah, and I use that on all my university sites, and it also prompts you.
Yes.
I think it's already built into the ones on our university server, so that one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, it has some other nice features too. I use it on almost every site.
I've been building university sites as well, and that's what got me into the accessibility, because I had to put that into my contract and make sure it happened. But I'm just going to ask a super technical question, but
oh, sure.
There are, like, I feel like I do 99% of things right, but then there's weird things like I have icons as a font in a pseudo class on an element, and apparently that gets read by the screen readers. And so there's just those little things that I wouldn't have known that was an issue unless I had accidentally read a CSS Tricks article about using the data icon instead, which you can put an aria hidden on, and then use the CSS to style it. And I saw that when Elementor plugin does icons, it does it exactly the appropriate accessible way. But when I'm doing this icon font in a pseudo class in CSS, that could be read by the screen reader. How concerned do we need to be about those things? Because sometimes we do that with CSS because it's the only way to do it. And at what point do we say this is good enough versus not, like we really do need to reinvent things?
Yeah, so like different levels of accessibility are built even right into WCAG, right? We have like AAA, AAA built into it in recognition of the fact that you don't have to build every single thing to be AAA perfect accessible. There is some leeway, and even like when I'm doing accessibility audits of sites for clients, every issue that I find gets tagged with a severity, and there are minor, moderate, major, and blocker. I mean, the main thing you want to make sure of course, is that there's no blockers where somebody is just absolutely prevented from doing something because there's some kind of issue, right? Like the button on your form isn't actually a button and can't receive keyboard focus, which is a problem I've seen. Right, so nobody can, if somebody can't use a mouse, now they can't submit that form. And the people who can't use a mouse are a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are blind and people who have mobility issues in their arms or arthritis. So you're leaving out a lot of people. So having some text from an icon or red, definitely not a blocker, definitely not major. I would put that in the minor category. So if it's something where you're just kind of stuck and it's like, oh, I just really need this icon here, it's okay. Don't do it every time and don't do it on every site, but if there's a situation where that's the best that you can do, then that's the best you can do. And somebody's going to hear an extra word or two. It doesn't stop them from doing anything or prevent them from understanding the site. So that's a relatively minor issue.
Do you find that people are worried about not being perfect, and so they just disregard it altogether?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's like, well, if I can't do this perfectly, why would I even bother? And, the reality is, if you do, so there's a WebAIM did a report, and they've done it twice now, to my knowledge, the Million, what did they call it? The Million Project or something, where they did the top 1 million home pages across the internet and tested them for accessibility issues. An average site has literally hundreds of accessibility issues, but when you look at the list, there were 7 or 8 that came up just over and over again. Like, if all you did for accessibility was focus on those 7 or 8 issues, that's probably going to cover 80 or 90% of the accessibility issues on a site.
I like, especially when I'm working with larger companies and I get a lot of pushback on things like that. I like to bring up a little bit about the lawsuits, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title III, which for accessible places, which includes websites.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you wanted to speak about that at all as well.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because the Title III refers specifically to what are called, quote, places of public accommodation, meaning, restaurants, movie theaters. And then there has been a big argument on whether or not websites count as places of public accommodation. And it's very messy right now because the Supreme Court has not ruled on it. And the district courts are all over the place, with some of them saying that they do count, some of them saying that they don't, and then some saying that they do, but only for businesses that also have a physical location.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So it's really messy, and I have to explain this to clients all the time when they say, oh, I want my website to be ADA compliant. Well, that doesn't actually exist. It's in this weird, fuzzy gray area. So we're all kind of assuming that what that probably means is WCAG AA. But I can't make any guarantees because the law is very fuzzy right now.
Do you think that with all of the shutdowns and everything moving more, relying online, is this going to become more of an issue? Maybe even less of a gray line?
I hope so. Yeah. Because I do think we need to re-examine the way that we approach web development and web design, and to think about how we can be more inclusive about that, and to really be familiar with the people and the technologies and devices that are used to access the websites that we build. So if there is, some big event that is otherwise negative that could have a silver lining, like, I would hope that would be it.
In reading your bio, besides being first on the scene for everything that's ever happened in the internet of meaning and importance, you also do like all these other crazy things. Like you have, there's a software company you're involved with that has a lot of different plugins. You're author of a jQuery for Designers book, and you do a website in a weekend for nonprofits. Oh my gosh, like we could just talk all day.
Yeah, I'm a very busy person. I stay busy.
Oh yeah,
I've always got a project.
Yeah, what do you want us to know about that? I want to know about all these things.
Yeah, sure. So probably the one that's impacting my life right now the most would be Nsquared, the little software company that I run with Nathan and Tyler. So we have 5 plugins so far that we've built together. And we're hard at work on the latest one is, I would say, maybe a little over half done. I mean, it's released and people are using it, but we're building like a premium tier with more features in it that we're working on. And so I am currently doing that every Tuesday and Thursday all day, and then working on digitally Monday, Wednesday, and Friday all day. So just constantly shifting gears. But Nsquared is doing really well. We're growing. We have a marketing person. We have a couple of support people working for us. We have a designer and another developer. So that's all going really well, and it's really exciting. And I think it's really exciting for us too to be able to offer employment to people during a pandemic. Like our marketing person, we actually hired after he got laid off from his previous job because they shut down because of the virus. So I think that's exciting for us that we're able to do that and have a positive impact on people's lives in that way.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find you online?
Sure. So I've got my little personal site at nataliemac.com that links off to everything else that I do. And I'm not very good at any kind of social media, but I do have accounts under Natalie Mac at Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Interested in being on the show? Sign up on our website, womenandwp.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and join our Facebook group to have conversations with other women in WordPress.